Thanks, Mayor. This question is not for you, so
Not for me.
I don't think so. So I just want to take a couple of minutes to recognize that I know I'm continuing to hear concerns from residents who really are not in support of doing this project. And they have expressed concern that they see that though they have a sense that the community is still, the determination hasn't been made as to whether we're moving ahead or we're not moving ahead. And then when they hear us saying, well, we're taking the next step forward, they're like, hold on a second. I thought this hadn't been decided, but yet you're getting ready to spend more money and take the next step forward. And so my explanation has been, and I guess I'm just going to reiterate it here, there has been enough support in the community that compels us to move this process to the point where we have a project that we can present to the community and say, this is the general idea of what we're working on. This is kind of the size of the project. This is what services we think might be offered. And this is an idea of how much this might cost. So until we take this next step, which lots of research and work up to this point suggests we should, but until we do, we won't be able to give the residents something that they could vote on. And again, I continue to hear that the residents would like the opportunity to vote on whether a community center comes to the city or not. So I think that's my perception of where we're at and why we're doing this. And I think it's also helpful to have a little clarification that though the motion says we're moving ahead with the design services at a cost of $95,000, that half of that cost is going to be borne by the YMCA. So only half of that is actually a Prairie Village expense, $47,500. Correct me if I'm wrong. And then just for further explanation, if somebody could share with me, and maybe this is for you, at what point will the work that we're considering approving right now, when do we anticipate it will be completed? And then what would happen next just for residents who are following along?
The time frame for when this conclusion of the study would be towards the end of next summer. That's the kind of the time frame we put in there for how long it would take to get to completing the study. That doesn't mean that's when we'll take it for a public vote, but that has to be governed by when the county can do that. We're having a meeting Wednesday, our kickoff meeting, but we're also have already scheduled our first public involvement meeting. Our first, probably some of our initial efforts will be having some public meetings to gather input about what Prairie Village wants from the YMCA and the library before we really start doing a lot of work. So the next steps would be public involvement. They'll start doing some background work and some things to prepare for that. But before we will design anything or show any drawings, we're going to engage the public and learn about it. And then we'll come back. I'll give some updates after we have that meeting. I think it's November 17th, our public involvement meeting. With our game plan, kind of what we see is laying out there. But, you know, we want to have lots of good information on our website and communicate well as we move forward with this project so everybody understands where we're at and where we're headed. So the next thing would be some public involvement.
Sorry, just to clarify, Keith. So you anticipate this step being completed by the end of next summer 2024?
That's correct.
Okay. Thanks for all of that. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I'll just add to your good point, Piper, about splitting the cost of this contract half and half with the Y. But this contract also is 2/3 of the overall sort of deal with BNIM, the final third of which is being paid by the library. But for their own internal governance purposes, they have their separate contract with the library, but the same project. So it's 1/3 each between the three parties, basically. Greg?
Thank you, Mayor. That was actually a point I was going to make, just for the record, and everybody knows it's $143,000 of total contract value. We're covering 2/3 of that. I have a few questions here, and Keith, maybe for you, maybe for you, Wes. The line item in here under the motion that talks about the YMCA funds, are those already in hand, or how is that being? Okay, yeah.
This was budgeted in economic development.
Okay.
So
okay,
it's a current expenditure.
But those are funds from the Y.
So What was just explained, the 47.5, we have budgeted 50,000. And then the Y will be contributing the other 47,500. So it's a third, and a third.
Okay.
The only difference in this is that the library, as part of their protocols and procedures, needed to have an independent contract with the architect. So that's why you're seeing just two partners in this.
Okay, so on the other one, kind of picking up on Piper's line of questioning with the order of operations here. So we'll get some, estimates from the architects, right? But then it goes on later to talk about they'll also work with a construction estimator. So I'm curious, will we see those preliminary architectural estimates earlier in the process? And then the construction estimates will come at the end of the summer 2024? Or can you give us a little more detail on order of operations there?
Well, I think as we develop options and we'll be developing costs as we develop those options. I mean, there'll be a point in time towards the end of this where we'll have, this is the building and what it looks like and what it will cost, the best of our ability to figure that out. There'll be lots of steps between now and then as we're kind of estimating those costs to make sure we're working on that as we go. But I don't know that there's an exact time frame in the initial process that anytime we come back to council with ideas, just similar as we are with City Hall, we'll have costs and understanding of what we're presenting and if we're wanting some direction on how we should head. We have to do that with all three entities as well. But by the end of it, we'll have firm concrete costs that we would be presenting to councils. And then if all that sounds reasonable, then that was what would go to a public vote. And there's a lot more things than just costs that go into this, as you know, so.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
If I could add, when we set this timeline up, it was set up with the timeline of next November's election. Now, that may seem like a long ways away, but we have to have this completed by, I don't know, what was the deadline, Michelle, August? And so it has to be completed because the ballot language has to be developed so many days in advance. So really that time frame is shrinking by the time of the substantial and public engagement, the schematic designs, all the amenities. It will come to you where you can see it, you understand what the community has supported and asked for, and then the cost. And then ultimately it's the decision by this body, does it go forward to the agenda for a public vote? And of course, once we have those dollar amounts as staff, we've talked about this a little bit already, is how would or could it be paid for? And what those options are as part of all of that together.